everybody. It's Bev at Hamtopia again, Thursday, the 9th of April, 2020, and this is chapter 19 of The Reaper and the Scribe. Thank you for joining me today. Chapter 19. 21st century Alice now had a plan firmly fixed in her mind. She knew not why, but a strong need to acquire large buildings in as many towns as possible had now set in. Money, of course, was no object. The more she spent, the more her business seemed to make. For those 2 weeks, Freddie Chambers was in charge back at the office. New contracts were coming in daily, but Freddie was well on top of his work. Alice was feeling calm and collected as she was writing check after check. She was dealing with many different builders, but Alice made sure she only used one builder in each city she was in. The more towns and cities she visited, the larger the list of builders became. Alice removed her phone from her handbag and depressed Freddie's quick dial key. Although Freddie was not answering the phone to anyone that day due to the massive increase in new orders that he had to deal with, he certainly wasn't going to miss that call. "Alice, it's good to hear from you. How are you today?" "I'm good, thanks, Freddie, but we have to do something about all these different builders I have acquired." "Why, my love, what's happened?" "There are just too many names for me to keep up with." "What you need is someone you can trust to act as a buildings coordinator." "Yes, that's exactly what I need. Can you find me someone you can trust? They are going to be dealing with very large sums of money." "I'll do a spot of searching for you." "Unless you fancy the job," she said hopefully. I don't think so. It sounds a little too permanent to me." Both parties laughed and said their goodbyes. Occupying the head of the company's desk, Freddie pondered upon this new task. The one obvious person was, of course, his best friend and brother-in-law, Jamie Winters. He picked up the receiver of the phone and dialed Jamie's number. After many rings, he received no answer, no engaged tone or voicemail message, just nothingness at the other end of the line. Deciding it was lunchtime, he would go to the best privately owned preserved railway in the world and ask Jamie in person. When Freddie arrived, he found the door to the main building unlocked, but Jamie was nowhere to be seen. He took out a bunch of keys from his pocket. He checked all around, but didn't see anyone, so he began to close the door. "Can I help you?" said a female voice from inside the building. Freddie immediately swung the door back open. "Who are you?" he retorted in a startled manner. "Be at ease, Freddie Chambers. I mean you no harm." "You have me at a disadvantage, Mrs. "I am no one's Mrs. I am here merely to inform you that your friend will be back in due course. He is not the one you seek for the position you are charged to fill." "Excuse me, but how do you know this? This is information only myself and my wife know. Exactly who are you, please?" "I am the wind that blows the seeds in autumn. I am the shower of rain that makes them grow. I am nature, and I know of 2 Victorian siblings you took care of. The same two who were exchanged with your friend and his sister. The same sister who is a reincarnation of the girl you fell in love with. Freddie's legs suddenly felt like they would give way beneath him. He felt faint and very confused. Come, sit, Freddie Chambers. I have much to tell you. Freddie did as he was bid and took a seat. There is much going on, Freddie Chambers, and your wife is critical to its fruition. I'm sorry, I really am, but who are you? The old lady in dull, ordinary clothes transformed into a beautiful goddess with waist-length white hair, a flowing white gown, and a long staff with a crystal at its tip. The simplest answer is, I am Mother Nature. The vortex your friends traveled in was of my making. I sent your friend and his sister back in time to see if a human, indeed the human race, could change its ways. Alicia, who was once one of the worst examples of human greed, was how I tested humanity. My experiment worked much better than even I had hoped, and Alicia became the wonderful Alice that now bears your name. Is my answer sufficient for you, Freddie Chambers? Freddie, his mouth still agape, just nodded his head. And so, to business then, Freddie Chambers. Search out the human known as Laura Dinsdale. I have already placed her life force into your friend's DNA. She is the one who will coordinate your wife's builders. Again, Freddie only nodded his head. Mother Nature walked up to him, placing her hand on his cheek. Freddie was filled with an overwhelming feeling of serenity, and he closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was outside, locking the door. A smile came to his lips as the feeling she had placed within him remained. He knew what had just passed was not a daydream. He came down from the clouds and retrieved his mobile phone, and at the third attempt, he finally depressed Alice's quick dial number. Alice! Alice! I know who you need! Are you aware of anyone named Laura Dinsdale? Yeah, of course I am. She used to be my father's secretary before she was replaced when she left to have a family. Why? She is the one. Okay, but how did you know about her? Freddie pondered upon that question, but with the history that he and the rest of the Winters had had, he decided to tell his wife what had transpired. This is going to sound very strange, but an old lady who was sitting in the engine shed when I went to find Jamie told me. Freddie paused and waited for the laughter to start, but instead, Alice said, "Describe her to me, and describe everything about her. This is important, Freddie." An ordinary-looking old woman to begin with, but she changed into, well, she called herself Mother Nature, and before you ask, I have not been drinking. Find Laura and give her the job. What? You believe me? Of course I do. We both know something strange is happening, so just go with it. Wow, that went easier than I thought it would. We're being helped, Freddie. We just need to keep doing what we're doing. All righty then. As soon as I've had my lunch, I will find her, and offer her the position. Okay, love. Keep me informed and well done. By the way, do you know where Jamie is? Judging by the fact that my mother and father are away for 2 weeks, and I'm doing what I'm doing for 2 weeks, you are doing my job for 2 weeks, and Mother Nature has intervened at Jamie's place, I think we can guess that Jamie will be missing for 2 weeks as well. Yeah, I think I can agree with that, said Freddie. You will find Laura's address in the address book in the fourth drawer down in my desk at the office. This has become your main task for this afternoon. I think the business will be fine without you for a while. Your wish is my command, my love, said Freddie, as he bid Alice farewell and then hit the end call button of his phone, ending one of the strangest chats he had ever had with Alice. As Alice placed her phone back into her bag, a smile came to her face because she instinctively knew she was on the right track. Freddie headed back to the office to find Laura's address. Back in medieval times, Jamie had had his wash, kissed his lover goodbye, picked up his handcart, and had made it back to the windmill. That day he arrived before his surrogate father and was taking the tools into the windmill when the master builder arrived. Good to see you here early today, son, and looking so refreshed, too. Thanks, Dad. I'm keen to start work today, as we are working on the gearing. The gearing is fairly simple and straightforward. The skill is in choosing the wood, son. You will find that all woods are not the same. Some are hard, some are soft. Which type of wood do you think we will use for the gears themselves? Hardwood, so they will last longer, said Jamie. Yes and no, replied the father. If you use all hardwood, it can become brittle, as it does not give as much as soft wood does. This is something that I am trying out. I am making the teeth of the gears out of hardwood, but the ring that will fit on the shaft will be made of softwood. In other words, the outer part will be hard working, and the inner part will give a little and not just crack under pressure. Jamie thought about what this genius of a man was saying and saw that it could work. The thing was, he had never seen this in history books. In Jamie's mind, he heard a voice. Forget history. Learn this method, as it is what you will need to use. The female voice was then silent. Jamie had learned to listen to that voice and follow its lead. He watched his medieval father as he worked the wood on a very basic lathe-type rig. First, he made a ring out of soft wood. He then placed that ring onto a bigger ring of hardwood. He marked out the center hole and the outer edge of the soft wood, and with his crude but ultra-sharp tools, he fashioned a cog from the hard wood and cut away the inner ring to leave a hole in which the softwood would fit. He hammered the softwood ring into the hard cog, then bored 4 holes into the outer edges, driving 4 wooden pins through both cog and center ring. When the cog was finished, it was 3 feet in diameter, with perfectly accurate gearing cog teeth, albeit from simple tools. The cog itself took all day to make, and the craftsman told the apprentice he would show him how to make the corresponding gear on the morrow. Jamie still couldn't understand why it was so important to learn such out-of-date skills, but future history would explain it to him in a very harsh way. In the 21st century, Freddie was knocking on the door of the house owned by Laura Dinsdale, the ex-secretary to the retired head of company. She answered the door, and Freddie explained who he was. "Do come in, Mr. Chambers," said Miss Dinsdale. "Please, call me Freddie." "How can I help you?" "Are you at a point where you are ready to come back to work?" "That's something that's been on my mind lately. The kids are now in full-time education, and I do have a lot of time on my hands, but I thought that the new CEO had a secretary." "That's not the position I am offering." "Oh, I see. What position is it in that case?" "We have branched out a good deal since you left, and we are working to restore old properties, to turn them into hostels for homeless people." "I like the sound of that, but where do I come in?" "One of your duties before you left was to coordinate all of the different suppliers and keep them on their toes." "Yes, organizing is one of my strong points." "We want you to organize all of the different builders, one builder from each town we work in, keeping them to their schedules and making sure that they receive the supplies they need. Do you think you could do that, Laura?" "Yes, I am sure I could." "What would the salary be?" "Triple what you were on before." "Mr. Chambers, I was on a really high salary before." "That matters not, and please call me Freddie." "There is one thing that may be a problem, however." "How so?" Laura undid the top button of her blouse and rolled up her sleeves, revealing tattoos on her chest and arms. Freddie inspected them and said, "Very nice art. Now, do tell me more about this problem." "I didn't have tattoos when I worked for you before, and I didn't know how you would feel about them." "Will they hinder your work in any way?" "Not at all. In that case, there is no problem, is there?" "When do I start?" she gleefully replied. "Monday. Come in and we will work things out. Then from there, you can work from home. How does that sound?" "That sounds great! Thank you!" exclaimed Laura, suddenly gaining a new outlook on life. In 1854, Albert Winter's boat, Lightning, was now in dry dock, suspended above the ground on large chunks of wood. This was to be day one of the work to turn her into a separate bow and stern. For the time being, the family could still live on the boat, for John Winters was going to be working on the bow section first. He had already marked where the new bulkhead was going to be placed, and work had begun clearing away the metal that was not needed. Inside the back cabin were Albert, Doris, James, John, and a rather mannish-looking Alice, with little Freddie in her arms. "Well, she looks like a man to me," said Albert. "I knew those old clothes would come in handy," said Doris. "I can't believe how you look, sis," exclaimed John. "What about your voice, Alice?" said James. "I'm not planning on doing much talking. I just want to see these new steamboats in action. I want to see how they handle, so that I can give my dad a heads up for when Lightning is ready. Remember, Alice, you aren't going to see any like I'm building, but you will be able to see just how many are changing," said John. "Well, lass, here we are at the start of your future. Get yourself off into that brave new world of yours," said Albert, as he kissed his beloved daughter on the cheek. I'm not starting my future, Dad. You have done that with your arduous work and foresight. I'm making sure that our name will carry forward in time." With that, Alice was off the boat, dressed and looking like a man, heading off into what was most certainly a man's world. Alice stuck her flattened chest out and strode down the canal towpath. She was a little apprehensive, but the excitement of what was to come outweighed that feeling tenfold. This was what she had been waiting for, and her time was now. Back on the boat, the three men, Albert, John, and James, had all gone topside to share a smoke. John by now had his own favorite pipe and took a long toke, then passed it to his younger brother, who now smoked, but not as much as his father or elder brother. "Well, then, let's see what Alice comes up with on her travels. I'm sure she will be bursting to tell us when she gets back tonight," said Albert. "I'm sure she will," said James. John smiled at his younger brother and said, "It's your turn now, me lad. You are coming with me to the factory. I will leave you with the engine master for the next 2 weeks, so that you will get a simple schooling of how to run an engine for when lightning is finished." "I'm ready and willing when you are, John," said John's excited brother. The two young men set off to John's place of work and left Albert enjoying his pipe. Albert was a proud man, and the sight of his 2 sons walking down the towpath made his heart swell. Doris came up from below deck and said, "I've got little Freddie laid down for a nap, so let's see what's going on at the bow." "Righto, lass, come on." Albert and Doris climbed down into the hold where 3 workmen were riveting the new bulkhead in place. "Now then, lads, what happens when you get that fixed into place?" asked Albert. One of the boatyard workers explained that he wasn't sure, as they had never done anything like this before. "Our job is to fit a new bulkhead fore and aft, and then our job is done," said another of the workers. "Oh, I see," said Albert. "Would you men like a pot of tea?" said Doris. The man in charge lifted the front of his cap with his forefinger and thumb a little, and accepted graciously for all 3 of them. Doris climbed back out of the hold and made her way back to the galley. "So, it will be my son John's men doing the cutting then?" said Albert. "Aye, Albert, what your John wants doing is beyond us," said Thomas Schofield, the foreman of the dry dock, as he arrived on the scene. "Now then, Tom, how's you today?" said Albert to his old friend. "Fair to middlin'. This is a bit of a do, Albert, cutting a canal boat in half. I've never heard the like," answered Thomas. "Evidently, this is the future of canal boating, Tom." "There isn't any future in canal boating, Albert. Your John was right to get out while he could. These steam railways will take all the canal's work, you mark my words. I may be right, Tom, but the canals will see me out, I'm sure. Aye, old lad, we are a dying breed. Some things will never change, though. Here's Doris with some tea." "I thought I heard your voice, Tom, so I made extra," said Doris. John and his brother James arrived at the factory where John worked, and the new works manager introduced his brother to the workforce. John and James climbed the stairs to the office that John shared with the engineer and owner of the works. "Wow! Is this your office, John?" "Yes, James." "You are a lucky man. You are doing just what you wanted to do. Yes, well, that's because of the times we live in. If you want anything bad enough, and you are willing to work towards your goal, you can achieve it, said John. I can't. After I learned to work this machine, steam engine, interrupted John. Sorry, steam engine. I will be stuck in the boat for the rest of my life, continued James. That's not entirely true, James. Keep this to yourself, but you will be only doing this for a brief time. The thing is, my dad will sell Lightning not long after she is refitted, and Mam and Dad will retire. That is when you become free from your duties, and with the experience you gain from here, learning to use the engine, you will be able to become a steam locomotive driver. Once you get a job on the railways, you will be set for life. I don't understand, John. If you know that Dad will do this, why are you doing all this work to the boat? It's a bit difficult to explain, James. You're just going to have to trust me. Now, are you ready to begin? Yes, sir, said James, a broad grin lighting up his face. John took James down into the cellar, where the engine that was to be fitted to the boat sat on a jig, with a small boiler at its side. The engine was cold, and the boiler was awaiting the fire to bring it to life. That looks great, John. Did you really make that engine? Yes, right down to the last brass bolt in the pressure gauge. It feels strange down here, like we're not alone. What is that white brick in the wall? It always feels a bit strange down here, but not in a bad way. As for the white brick, just go over to it and place your hand near it. James walked over to the white brick in the middle of the wall and tried to touch it. It was like two magnets repelling each other. There was a force stopping him. Look at that! I can't touch it! Shouted James. I am the same, and evidently I am the one who rebuilt that wall 5 years ago. Best just leave it be in that case, said James. My thoughts exactly. It is almost as if that little white brick is of some importance, said his brother. The sound of boots hitting the rungs of a ladder heralded the entrance of James's teacher. What Harold Brown didn't know about steam engines wasn't worth knowing, and James had his undivided attention for the next week or two. James didn't need an in-depth knowledge. He just needed to be able to run the small boiler and engine while his dad still owned the boat. Harold, it is good to see you. This is my brother, James, and he is yours for the next fortnight. He will be looking after this engine once it's in situ. Harold Brown held out his arm to shake James's hand. A bit young to be looking after this engine, isn't he? Harold was a down-to-earth, matter-of-fact type person, and he wasn't shy of giving his opinion. Young he may be, but he is the only one available to do the job, so he has to learn, answered John Winters, sounding quite official. I'm sure he will be a credit to you, Mr. Winters. I'm sure he will, Harold. John Winters left the two men to get to know each other as he made his way back to the dry dock to see how things were progressing. In medieval times, the workday was over, and Jamie arrived back at what was the dwelling of his surrogate father, John Parkin. He put the handcart of tools in what looked like a barn under the house. The barn was empty with it being summer, but Jamie knew that the little barn became the central heating in winter when the animals were brought in, and was pleased that he wouldn't be there when winter fell. He was used to being able to feel the heat from the heating system and not smell it. John Parkin's wife, his medieval mother, was making a meal as Jamie climbed the ladder into the one-room dwelling. She smiled at him. The very first thing he noticed was her discolored teeth. That shocked him a little, as his girlfriend Laura's teeth were quite white. He soon realized that it was down to the difference in age, and that Mary Parkin had borne children, probably stripping her of a good deal of calcium, and there not being much available to replace it. On closer inspection, several of her teeth were actually missing. Mary poured water from a jug into a clay pot and handed it to Jamie. Jamie couldn't help but notice that the water was murky. "What's the matter with you, lad?" "Nothing. I just don't think I'm thirsty," said Jamie. Again, Jamie heard the now familiar voice in his mind. "Drink the water, Jamie Winters. It will do you no harm. You may have to get used to water like this again one day." Jamie smiled at his mother and took a drink from the cup. Although different to the water he was used to, it still refreshed him on that warm summer's evening. Jamie then realized he had been drinking from the stream near the windmill all day, so the drinking of this murky water became no problem to him at all. It wasn't long before his father returned, and the two men sat at the table. "Now then, lad, do you fully understand what we did today?" "I do, father." "Is it normal practice to make the gear how you did today?" "Nay, lad. This is something I have been working on. It's an idea to cut down the risk of fire." "I think it's a great idea, and tomorrow I can't wait to be working on the other one and then see them both in action," said Jamie. Jamie was quite enjoying this old but new to him technology. Deep down, Jamie loved any kind of engineering and was enjoying the conversation with his surrogate dad. He was about to start talking about adding several other gears to increase or decrease the load, but something stopped him doing so, as that would have been counterproductive to normal history carrying on the way it should. Soon the meal arrived, and it was a type of gruel. Jamie couldn't remember when he last ate as vigorously as he did that evening. After his meal, Jamie stood up and made his way to the ladder and said, "I'm going to meet Laura. If I don't see you tonight, Dad, I will see you at the windmill tomorrow." John Parkin just nodded his head and said to his wife as his son disappeared down the ladder, "It's good to be a young'un." "We can do the same thing as the young'uns," said Mary, a cheeky grin adorning her face. "Aye, lass, we can," said John Parkin as he took hold of his wife and pulled her onto his knee. By the time Jamie had climbed down the ladder and left the barn, Laura was waiting for him. She jumped into his arms and kissed him passionately. Jamie had been with the odd girlfriend 2 or 3 times, but had never devoted so much attention to any other girl. He was definitely enjoying himself as being the one who had only to learn simple mechanics and not the one to make the decision about how such things would be made. This freed his time to spend with Laura. They ran down into the village to see the traveling minstrels in the village square. Laura was excited to see the actors and musicians, as it was the way that the village received news of what was going on in the rest of England. Jamie pondered upon what was going on and realized just how blessed his life was back in the 21st century. Clean water information at his fingertips about what was happening on the entire planet and beyond, and the amount of clothes that he owned, because he noticed that both Laura and himself did not have a change of clothes. Even things like oral hygiene that Jamie and the rest of the 21st century people took for granted. He now looked on all of this with new eyes and decided that he would never take anything for granted again. As they reached the square, the show had just begun. All the players were men, but they had taken the parts of men and women. Laura was quite excited, because this didn't happen often, and most of the villagers were in attendance. "I wonder why my mam and dad aren't here," said Jamie. "Don't be silly. You know your dad doesn't ever come to this. He says news about what's going on outside the village is pointless," said a slightly confused Laura. "I meant to say I wish they would come. I know my dad's views on such things," said Jamie, covering his slip. "You've been funny these last couple of days." "I do love you," said Laura. "I'll be back to my old self soon. It's just that there's so much to do at work, and I have so much to learn. If I seem different or strange, it's just because of that. I promise you things will return to normal soon." Laura smiled at Jamie and said, "I love you, and I understand." The loving couple stood in the crowd arm in arm, watching the show until it ended. As they walked away, Jamie said, "What shall we do now? I have no chores until tomorrow, and it's a beautiful night. Let's go to the windmill and watch the sunset," answered Laura. "Come on, then," said Jamie. Jamie took the hand of his lover and began to run. The two giggling young people ran up the hill to the almost finished windmill without a care in the world. When they reached the top of the hill, where the windmill stood, for the first time Jamie looked down at the village. He saw something that he remembered from his own time, and the time he spent in 1849. It was a building that stood out from all the other buildings in the village. The building was a beautiful, new-looking, timber-framed office of some kind, with stark white walls broken up by black Jacobean beams of oak. "What is that building?" asked Jamie. You were doing it again. You know as much about that building as I do. Like all the villagers, I suppose. It's some kind of counting house, but no one ever goes in," said Laura. "I didn't mean what is it. I mean, I want to have a look at it," corrected Jamie. "But that place gives me the creeps. I don't like being there." "You'll be quite safe with me. We will just go down and have a look, and then come back to catch the sun going down. I've always been interested in that building. So come on. The sooner we have a look, the sooner we can come back and enjoy the sunset." "Okay, then, but I don't like it down there." Jamie and Laura set off down the hill, and in no time at all were looking at the building that Jamie was familiar with. Jamie walked up to the doorway. "It'll be closed with it being so late," said Laura. As she said that, an old gentleman came to the door. Laura began to run away, but Jamie stayed as the old man came up to him. "I don't think it prudent for you to draw attention to this place, Mr. Winters. Mr. Atkinson asks if you would take the young lady away, as you must not interfere with the workings of this building during your stay in this century." "Of course. Do offer Mr. Atkinson my apologies, and I will bid you a good day," said Jamie. At that point, The tall, imposing figure of Atkinson, Jr. arrived at the door. "That's okay, Mr. Braithwaite. I will handle this," said Atkinson, Jr. As he spoke, everything around Jamie stopped. The birds stopped singing, and Laura was frozen in mid-stride. "Do come inside, Mr. Winters." Jamie followed Messrs. Braithwaite and Atkinson inside. "Again we meet, Mr. Winters, and again in a time that isn't your own. Can you explain that to me?" "As I seem to be protected while I'm here, might I ask the same question, sir?" answered Jamie. A slight smile came to Atkinson Jr.'s mouth as he said, "Step into my office. I think we may have started on the wrong foot." Old Mr. Braithwaite shuffled back to his place and slowly sat behind his desk as Atkinson Jr. and Jamie entered the office. Sitting at the secretary's desk was a beautiful woman with long blonde hair. She raised her eyebrow as the two men walked in. "Tamara, let me introduce you to Mr. Winters. Mr. Winters is some kind of time traveler." "Ooh, how positively exciting! May I prepare for you a beverage of some kind, or perhaps something stronger?" asked Tamara Stapleton, the personal assistant to Mr. Atkinson. "Tea would be nice, but what of my girlfriend outside? Miss Laura Dinsdale is fine. As soon as you go out of here, things will return to normal, and you will be reunited with the girl you were sent back to exchange bodily fluids with," said Atkinson, Jr. Tamara's eyebrow raised once more. "The more you make love, the stronger the DNA bond will be." "You have me at a disadvantage, I'm afraid. Yes, I am from another time, but I'm not here for Laura. I'm here to learn how to build a windmill." "You could have learned the techniques for building a windmill in your own time. You didn't need to come back to the Century to learn firsthand. Yes, you are here to learn techniques that will be of use in the future, but the main reason for being here is for the DNA bond." "I thought that Laura was the girlfriend of the chap that I replaced, and as such a little pleasantness while I was here." "No. Bonding with this girl is the main reason you are here. The thing I don't know is how you are doing this, and why. Are you able to enlighten me, Mr. Winters?" "This is an unfortunate development. Do not tell him who sent you, as we are not aligned yet. Just say you are sent by a power as great as his father, and go no further into it," came the voice in his head. "Are you able to tell us who just gave you that message?" asked Tamara. "Who are you people? You just read my mind. And as for who sent the message that I received, you know I can't answer that." "I do understand your plight, Mr. Winters, and I think we are going to get no further with this conversation. All I ask of you is to not do anything foolish while you are here. You may drastically alter the path of the futures, of yourself and your sister, and that, my friend, would not be prudent. I will bid you good day, and hope that our paths do not cross again while you are here." Jamie hastily left the building, and as he caught up to Laura, time restarted. As Laura kept running, but it looked as if Jamie had run with her. Back in the office, Atkinson Jr. and Tamara were deep in discussion. "Are you thinking the same as me?" asked Tamara. It can be the only answer, but the goddess of nature hasn't intervened in all of my recollection. So why now? Maybe the time is coming for me to make my move, said Atkinson, Jr. No, my love, the second millennium of this new age of humankind is the right time. You mustn't move before then, said Tamara, as she placed her delicate arms around her lifelong lover. Jamie and Laura fell onto the grass by the windmill, out of breath after they had been running up that hill. Both sat up together and witnessed one of the best sunsets they had ever seen. I hope it is always like this, said Laura. Things never stay the same, but I'm sure life will be good for both of us, answered Jamie.